Thank you.
So welcome. I'm Dennis Charney. I'm the Dean of the School of Medicine. I've been Dean for a while. I'm in my 17th year. The average tenure of a Dean in my position in the United States is about 3.5 years. So it's generally not a secure position, but so far it's worked out. One thing to mention is, and I'm sure you're feeling this, the classes that are here is time flies, doesn't it? Right? I was competing. We have a Dean's Cup and we have a competition, every year. And one of the parts of the competition that I participate in is the strongest person competition, right, with the students. And the problem is I get older and they stay the same, right? So most of the students are medical students, first years. So, when I was doing it this year, I said, you're an MS1 and I'm an MS50. So time does fly. So I want to thank, the class for coming this weekend. You set the foundation for our school. We were a great school back then and we're a great school now. And so I want to give you a little bit of some comments about, how we're doing as a school now. And when I'm done, since we're a small group, you can ask me any question you want about what's going on here. So we've been investing a lot in research. We built a number of new research buildings. This is one of them. We're ranked in the top 15 in the country in NIH funding, which is a metric that we follow. Another metric we follow is how well are our scientists doing in making fundamental discoveries that change the lives of our patients. So one metric that I follow is how well and on the individual level are scientists doing in terms of getting NIH funding, and we're generally in the top 1, 2, or 3. So our scientists are competing as effectively as any in the country. But even a more important metric, for us is, are we making discoveries that change the lives of our patients? And I say to our faculty many times, they're probably sick of me saying it, but that it's not enough just to publish in top journals and get grants. It's, do you make discoveries that affect our patients? Do we discover new treatments for mental illness or cardiovascular disease or cancer? And so that's the metric that we hold ourselves to. And we're making a lot of progress there. I'll give just a couple of examples. We have discovered a vaccine for COVID-19, an intranasal vaccine, and it is now in clinical trials. And, if you read, what are some of the next steps for developing vaccines for COVID, it's intranasal. And so we're in the game there. We've got trials going on in phase 2 and phase 3. If you look at cancer, we have developed vaccines that essentially train the immune system to attack different forms of cancer. And so we have a vaccine facility in which our faculty, Nina Barwash is one of our top faculty there, to develop novel vaccines for prostate cancer and breast cancer and other forms of cancer. So we're pushing the envelope, there. When it comes to mental illness, we have made some major discoveries. That is an area that I'm involved with, and my research group several years ago discovered ketamine as a treatment for treatment-resistant depression, which is now on the market. So in many different areas, ranging from cardiovascular disease, cancer, mental illness, we are pushing the envelope to discover new treatments. And as part of that, we form our own companies, startups. So we got a number of startups that are working out very well. So the research infrastructure here at Mount Sinai and the quality of the faculty is very high. We do need another research building. This one is filled up, and so we're working to raise money to have another research building like this building, the Hess building. So that will happen, I think, over the next several years. If you look at education at Mount Sinai, and there's Dean David Muller leads our medical education program, and then we have Marta Filisola, who leads our graduate program. We attract the best and the brightest. And David and I say over and over again, if we were applying to Mount Sinai right now, we wouldn't get in. That's definitely true for me. The quality of the students is not only high in terms of the metrics, their GPA, the average GPA is like 3.8, and their standardized scores are very high, but it's the passion of the students that we recruit, whether it's passion for social justice and anti-racism, or to do research in the areas that, I mentioned, or to become a great physician. It's the passion that I think separates out Mount Sinai medical students from most other of the top medical schools in the country. Our clinical programs are very large, but back in 2013, we took over another health system, the Continuum Health System. So now we're the largest health system in New York City. So for example, we have Mount Sinai Hospital here. Then we have Mount Sinai Morningside, which is across the park, which used to be called St. Luke's, which was a Columbia hospital. We took over Roosevelt Hospital, which is now Mount Sinai West, which also was part of the Columbia Health System. And then we took over Beth Israel Hospital, which was part of Albert Einstein. And also now we have hospitals in Brooklyn, Mount Sinai Brooklyn, Mount Sinai Queens. We also are the primary affiliate of the VA hospital, the Bronx VA hospital. So we have a huge health system in terms of our hospitals. We got Palm Beach. We have an affiliation with Jupiter, and we have practices in Palm Beach. And we have affiliations with schools and universities from around the world, essentially. Most recently, with Rensselaer Polytech Institute, we've established a biomedical engineering program, and we'll have a new PhD program with them. So we got a lot going on, where you formed the foundation of our medical school, and we've come a long way since then, but it wouldn't have happened without you becoming part of a young medical school, back in, the late 60s, early 70s. You will hear from Ken Davis, this evening. Ken is one of my very closest friends. We've been friends for over 40 years, and he bleeds Mount Sinai blue. He's been at Mount Sinai essentially since 1969, except for a couple of years when he went to do a psychiatry residency at Stanford and then came back. So he'll reminisce with you tonight when he gives his presentation. So I could go on and on, but I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you might have about, what we're doing at the school, in all the major areas that I mentioned. And if you have any questions about where we're going, I'd be happy to answer then at this point.
Yeah, I've got one. It has to do with the student body. When we started in '68, our class, it was pretty innovative in a lot of ways. We had a exceptionally large number of women for the time. It was still a very small number, but more women. We also sort of broke the mold in that we had some more unusual kinds of educational backgrounds. We had an art history major. I had anthropology major. It wasn't the classic chemistry, biology kinds of majors. Is that still part of the tradition of getting in the new students from these kinds of diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, so our student body is diverse in almost every area you can think of, both in terms of their background, socioeconomic background, ethnicity, and also their intellectual pursuits. So was it 25 to 30 years ago, we started the Humanities and Medicine, program, where we had an early acceptance program for students that majored in the humanities. And that's been very successful. A number of years ago, David and I expanded that to include recruiting students who were majoring in physics and computer science and engineering, which also were not typical areas in which students focused on to go to med school, because the requirements of being, say, a physics major, along with, say, pre-med requirements, was almost not feasible. So, but we've expanded it. So in the current class, you'll find students, majoring from, humanities to biomedical engineering. So it's a very diverse class. So that principle we have carried on.
Do you have an MD, PhD program? And does Mount Sinai produce many academicians like myself? Which
Yeah.
is, I've had a whole career in academia as opposed to private practice.
Yes. So we have an MD, PhD program. We've had that for, decades. It's a very strong program, among the strongest, in the country. And, there is data that, looks at how many, like what percentage of your medical students will become faculty, at other medical schools as well as ours. And we are among the highest in the country in terms of our students becoming faculty members, whether they focus on research or being great clinicians. They tend to aggregate into a health system, academic health system environment. Yeah.
Yeah, about the startups, are they owned by Mount Sinai, or how do they work?
Yeah. So almost every time, in fact, like every time, when we form a startup, we have equity in the startup, but we also have to raise additional money, for the startup. So we will have substantial equity, but then investors that come in also will have substantial equity, and sometimes our faculty, the inventors, will have equity. So we're very entrepreneurial, and we want to have policies that facilitate our scientists to think about inventing things, whether it's discovering a new medicine or a new device for surgery. We are providing the infrastructure to do that. For example, in surgery, we're about to establish a surgical innovations center for our surgeons who have novel ideas on developing new devices for surgery. So yes, we generally have equity.
When somebody does start a company and you have equity, what kind of investment are we talking about here? I mean, that the hospital makes, or is this the medical school that's making this investment?
Well, it would be the medical school, not the hospital.
It would be the
So these are inventions that come out of the school. And frequently our investment starts before we do the spin out,
Yeah.
right? Where the inventor would have NIH funding running through the school. Philanthropy is very important in doing the research that leads to an invention. And then when we spin out, we will maintain equity based on our contribution to the science. And then, we will go out and then raise additional money. So we could have, say, 25% equity. In some cases, we had 80% equity. So there's a range depending on the invention. Sure.
Another question. When the school started, it was thought of as having a three-legged stool, the original philosophical bent. There was the clinical side, there was the basic science side, and there was the community medicine prevention side. How strong is that piece of preventive services, preventive training? The name was changed. This was one of the few schools that had the name community medicine that's now been altered and changed. Is that still an important part of the educational program and life of the institution?
Yeah, David can jump in on that. Prevention occurs with all our clinical departments. We do have a Department of Family Medicine. It's one of our academic departments. We have a Department of Environmental Science and Public Health. We now have a Department of Global Health that is doing something just quite amazing right now. I should mention it, where we have a program going on with the country of Guyana, with contributions from the Hess company, because they made an oil strike, to rebuild the health system in the country of Guyana. Rebuild the entire health system. And our Department of Global Health, under the leadership of Rachel Freeman, is doing that. So that's going to be an amazing story. And it includes providing health clinics in the rural areas of Guyana, better ways of screening for diabetes and hypertension. So our commitment to the local community, and now more globally, is as strong as ever.
Go ahead.
You know, drug development is just too important to leave the big pharma, which has other goals. Do you have, how is Sinai involved in potential drug development?
Yeah, so it's a big part of our, financial model that we make these discoveries and either spin it out based on, say, finding a new drug or partnering. Now, most of the time when we discover a new treatment, like in my case, ketamine, we had to do phase 3 studies, which can cost, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So we have the patent, it's our invention, and then we partner, license to a big pharma, but we get royalties, substantial royalties out of that go back into the school. We have a drug discovery institute. So it's one of our research institutes that provide infrastructure to our scientists, including our chemists. So we've recruited a fair number of chemists that work for us to develop new molecules that ultimately can be made into drugs. I'll give you one example that could be a game changer if it tends to work out. One of our basic and clinical researchers in diabetes, Andy Stewart, has found in his animal models that if you give a combination of an available cancer drug with another compound called harmine, the pancreas synthesizes beta cells. That has never been shown before. We've had harmine made, and we're now doing a clinical study in healthy subjects to do phase 1, getting the right dose of harmine, which we will find, and then we'll give it with the existing available anti-cancer drug, which is safe. And if that works to synthesize beta cells, that's a game changer for the treatment of diabetes. We have the patent. We're going to do up to phase 2, and then we will license it. But it all happened at Mount Sinai. So that's just some examples.
Future depends on pharmaceutical research, and their goals are different. They want to protect their little patents, and we're not that. And except for something like tirzepatide, they don't think in a big way in terms of what's possible for the future. It's only for the short term. So it's very encouraging that you have this innovative center develop, working with chemists.
Yeah, we have chemists on the faculty.
Getting to Michael's question, the Department of Dermatology has brought drugs to the market through Dr. Levenwall, Gutman, for 2 major diseases of atopic dermatitis and psoriasis.
Right.
And Levenwall is known throughout the world as the pioneer with bringing new biologics, and now they are topical biologics. So those 2 diseases account for a lot of office visits and not so much anymore. So he's devoted his whole life to that.
That's right. We've got many examples of that. It's part of our mission. If we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Well, they're going to do it eventually, but they're only thinking short term.
But they don't do the science for the most part. So most of big pharma relies on academic places like Mount Sinai and NIH funding to take the inventions and then make drugs. But, so if you take that away, pharma has big problems. So we want to fill the gap.
So this could be a difficult question, but I see AI coming at an incredible speed in my field and all of medicine, and it's like a tsunami. And I think medical students will come into a different world as far as practicing medicine. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah. So that's a hot topic for us right now. Do you remember the Washington Manual?
Yeah.
Okay, nobody's using the Washington Manual anymore. But I did, right? We all did. Yeah, so we're making major investments in artificial intelligence. One, we formed a new department, new academic department of artificial intelligence and human health. We recruited a scientist from Memorial, Thomas Fuchs, who's the inaugural chair of that department. And we are totally renovating a building on 101st Street. If you walk, you'll see stuff going on there. We're renovating the whole building, and it's going to be the James Family Building for artificial intelligence. So we're making major investments in AI. And I just formed a committee. David may not even know about it yet, but I just formed a committee with our IT people and Thomas Fuchs to look at what AI is going to do for how we teach medical students, graduate students, house staff, because it's going to have a big impact. And we want to regulate it, but we want to take advantage of it. And I've been fooling around with it with ChatGPT. I've been asking questions in terms of my own research to see, how accurate it is it. And I would say it's semi-accurate, but it makes mistakes too. I even asked it the other day to write my commencement speech. Wasn't so good. The one I wrote, I think, is better, but it's crazy what it might be able to do.
Talk to burnout. We all had medical scribes listening on a Bluetooth, everything we said, everything that was said, we were making all the check marks and hitting all the boxes that we're supposed to get for reimbursement, and at the same time giving us suggestions. They can make super docs out of ordinary docs.
At this point, I would say, when there was 1,000 scientists who said, research on AI should be paused. We don't agree with that. In the health environment, we got to keep learning from it, using it in the right way, whether it helps us run our hospitals or help our students learn. We're going to be researching what's the best way to utilize it.
So, when I was a student and then a resident here, there was a kidney and nephrology fellow named Bud Rose. And he ended up at the Brigham, and he's the guy that started Up to Date in Medicine. And that's still much more widely used than AI in terms of guiding therapy. Unfortunately, he died recently of dementia, but he made a major contribution.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of Bud Rose, but
No, I haven't.
yeah, he was here, and then he was a professor up at Harvard.
How am I doing on time? Do I still have time for? I'm good? Okay. How about other questions?
Research that comes out of Mount Sinai primarily ends up publishing?
What are the top 2 or 3 that we have thousands of publications, so, if there was an area that, you wanted to learn more about what we're doing in that area, we can help you get that information. Well, there's so many of them. So, I'd get in trouble if I picked 1 or 2 out. But if you said, what's the latest in cancer research at Mount Sinai, we can get you that information.
Follow up on a question on AI, but in general, are you doing research on how to make the life of a doctor better? In the sense that, when I visited the wards and so forth, they spend most of their time typing on the computer and so forth. And this is a major thing in burnout. This was an article.
That's what I was talking about with AI.
Yes.
With the AI.
Yeah.
In general, is that something that is being researched?
Yes. So I can answer that in a couple of ways. One, prior to the pandemic, I established an office of wellness and resilience, and named John Ripp dean for that. So I have a dean level faculty member who has staff that are looking at issues related to burnout and depression and anxiety, among our faculty, our house staff, and we also are paying a lot of attention to our med students and our graduate students in terms of their mental health. And we've been doing a lot of faculty surveys to determine what are the issues related to burnout. And there are many, but one is what you were just talking about, and that is the increased issues related to notes and what it's called pajama time, right? When you're at home and you got all these notes that you got to complete, it's a lot of stress. So we have been, working at, what is the best way to handle that in terms of scribes and so forth. So we're doing that in a very active way. We haven't fully solved it. Almost nobody has fully solved it, but it's on our radar. In addition, when the pandemic hit, and we got hit harder than anybody else, almost in the country, we were the epicenter of the epicenter. At one point, we had over 2,200 patients here, with COVID. We had a hospital in Central Park. At one point, we had beds in the lobby. It's hard to imagine what we were going through then. But as you know, in the beginning, there was no treatment, right? There was no vaccine, there was no treatment. And patients were dying at an unacceptable rate, and even the family members couldn't go in to grieve, with their family members. So it was a horrendous time. And one of the areas that I study is resilience. And I knew from the beginning of the pandemic that this was going to be a horrible stress on our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, our house staff, our faculty. So we established very early on a center for stress and resilience and personal growth to provide free evaluation and care to all those individuals in our hospitals. It did help a lot, but it was tough, incredible tough times. But there was a lot of heroism and bravery. And you should be very proud, of your school and your hospital at every level of how we handled it. If you're interested, we had a book written about what happened. It's called Relentless, and maybe we can, get copies. Because I knew in the beginning, we got to document what happened and who did what. And so we have a book that's published called Relentless. It reads like a novel. I'm not aware of any fatalities among, house staff, but we did have a fatality. It was a nurse practitioner at Mount Sinai West. Yeah. So not many, but even one is too much. And of course, a lot of people got COVID. Yep, including our faculty.
I think the doctor that originally described COVID in China died from the disease.
Yeah.
When you look back, it's hard to imagine, right? When you think back what we were going through.
Go back 100 years.
Yeah. But when if you think of what, there are people in the audience here who were here, that March of April, May, June of 2020, it's tough. Revealed the character of Mount
Actually,
Sinai.
Mount Sinai was involved in discovering the use of anticoagulants in the treatment of COVID.
That's true. Yep. And like I said, we now have vaccine that we're testing. So
Yeah.
our research labs opened up in May. And we one of the first to reopen our research because we felt we had to be at the forefront of discovering new treatments and a better understanding of COVID.
Yeah, some of the first antibody work was done here
Right.
at Mount Sinai.
Right.
The
On COVID
monoclonal
antibodies.
antibodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're good? Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tonight.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. We appreciate
Yeah.
that. We appreciate
Yeah.
that.